this is where I stepped in it, Jimmy.
Yes, here it comes. If you guys been wondering, what did he say? This is what he said.
I said, you got to read all the studies, right? All of them.
This is called doing your own research, and you're not supposed to do this. Even it. Back, we have our special guest with us. Mark Crispin Miller's here. He's a noted social critic and professor of media, culture, and communications at New York University. He's the author of numerous books, including Boxed In, The Bush Lexicon, and Fooled Again. In 2020, NYU launched an investigation into him after fellow faculty members complained about his unorthodox views and coverage of controversial topics.
Jeez.
His writings currently appear on the Substack titled News from Underground and the extended trailer for his documentary. Well, we're going to play that today. He's got a new documentary in the works right now. It's called Reading the World, The Life. Here, I'll show it to you. Reading the World, The Life and Times of Mark Crispin Miller. So welcome to the show. Welcome back, Mark Crispin Miller. How are you, pal?
I'm okay. How are you?
I'm doing well. You know, getting along with my new friends very well after COVID. How about yourself?
Oh, no, I think those people are dead to me.
Yes, they are. It's still painful, you know, because the people who are dead to me are very, very funny comedians, and I miss them. I miss their humor and their camaraderie, but they really went the wrong way during COVID, and it's painful. I miss them.
It is, and it's actually having an effect on how some people view this film. That's a little teaser for you.
Oh, what?
I want to add, Jimmy, that the director producer of the film, my wife Amy Smiley, is actually sitting next to me. So, you know, if it's appropriate when we get into the film, she may have some things to say.
Okay, sure. I just want to let people know that, you know, you've been a big deal in, you know, people who are skeptics of power, the establishment, the oligarchy. You've been taught a class on how propaganda works at NYU University. So you've been on the forefront of this. You're considered, you know, an anti-establishment figure, and much needed, by the way. In fact, you've got a lot of praise. David Foster Wallace said of you, Miller's 1986 Deride and Conquer, the best essay ever written on network advertising, details vividly an example of how TV's contemporary appeal to the lone viewer works. Also, Katrina vanden Heuvel, who was in charge of The Nation, she says, I say this with praise. He was a heretic, and heretics challenge the so-called conventional wisdom. I don't know why she acts like you're dead, but you're still alive. You're still doing that. You're still doing that. And
I had the same reaction to that quote. I wish that hadn't, you know, been in the past tense.
Yes.
Because I am still here.
Maybe the Mark Crispin Miller we all knew is dead to her. Anyway, he is the most systemic thinker alive in the world, Naomi Wolf. So lots of people have said lots of nice things about you. Here is, and the question is, how did a young Shakespeare scholar end up as a leading expert on the propaganda that pervades the world today? So how did that happen? That's what this film's going to tell us, right?
That's the arc of my career. That's the story we're going to tell, because it's, you know, far more important a story than the one we discussed last time I was on, which was mainly about how NYU tried to get rid of me, and also forbid me to teach my propaganda course.
Because you were debunking the propaganda around COVID, and they didn't want you to do that, so they took that course away from you, right?
I wasn't even really debunking it. I was speaking hypothetically to my students about the fact that most propaganda courses in universities tend to dwell on dwell on the past. They you know, the totalitarian propaganda, and that reduces the subject to a kind of academic exercise. My view was and remains to be that we study propaganda not so we'll know what the Nazis did and the Bolsheviks did or what happened during the Cold War. Any decent propaganda course is going to teach the students how to spot propaganda and then how to determine whether it's truth or falsehood, okay? And I used a hypothetical example the first day of class, saying, I was teaching it remotely. So I said, why are we doing this? Well, you hate this, I hate this, we're not in the same room. Well, it's because of COVID. Now, there are many things we could discuss about COVID. Say, for example, you decide to write a paper on masking, all right? Or we spend a week talking about masking. I said, if you're going to do that, you have to read all the literature on masking. I mentioned that all the most rigorous scientific studies on the subject had found that masks don't work. I told them this. I said, you will have to read those studies, but you also have to read recent studies that have been rushed out. I didn't say rushed out, but that find otherwise, right? So this led one of the students in the class to demand that I be fired for putting the students at risk. She went on Twitter, and even though she had only 79, followers, it led to 3 big media hit pieces on me, including NBC News in New York. Clearly, the university was somehow behind this. And then a month later, most of my department colleagues demanded that I be investigated, that my conduct be scrutinized. They accused me not only of telling the students not to wear masks, which I had never done, but they accused me of hate speech and attacks on students. I mean, it was the whole woke playbook, Mm-hmm. And I had done none of these things. I've never done things like that. The class had always been very popular. So they didn't fire me, but they did tell me that for the good of the department, the following semester, I shouldn't teach the course. And then it turned out that the next semester stretched into the subsequent semesters, and they never wanted me to teach it again. Basically, I was found guilty of teaching the slaves to read. You follow me? That was the crime. I've never told my students what to think. I offer myself as a kind of example of how you go about thinking critically for yourself. Okay. So the arc of my career, to get back to your original question, I started out as a grad student in English. I was an English professor for several years. I studied and taught Shakespeare, Renaissance literature, and also American film. Now, as I studied the great, films that have come out of Hollywood, I discovered that you can subject these great movies to the same kind of close reading that I had learned in graduate school, to deal with great literary texts. So I shifted over to the movies. And then I discovered, idly watching a commercial one day with the sound turned down, I discovered that advertising is also a text. Advertising is something that we can also, subject to very close reading. Now, ads are not like great works of literature. They're not ambiguous or subtle. Well, no, I take that back. They're very subtle. And if you watch them with care, you discover what it is they're doing visually to try to get you to buy a deodorant, soap, or a cigarette or whatever. So I started studying advertising that way. So I was beginning to look at propaganda as a close reader, you see. And this then led me to start looking at political speeches. I was writing for magazines with human readers as opposed to academics. I was writing, for the New Republic, The Nation, Rolling Stone. And I was increasingly interested in these kinds of texts, not literary texts per se, not cinematic texts per se, but commercial and political texts. And then this led me to discover the true depth and scale and nefariousness, dangerousness of propaganda across the board. And this at a time, you mentioned it was in 2020 that this happened to me. Well, it couldn't have been a timelier study than it is. It has been since COVID started, and than it is now, right? With this clown show in Washington, we have been living under a kind of serial bombardment by propaganda since 2020, one thing after another. So propaganda is not just lies in print or lies that come squawking out of a loudspeaker in the streets of China. Propaganda often comes at us as events. And the more closely we study those events, the more we see that these are not natural, organic happenings. Now, this is where some people, roll their eyes. They call me a conspiracy theorist. But as I told my students back when I was allowed to teach the course, the study of propaganda is very difficult. Not intellectually difficult, but psychologically difficult, and also socially difficult. Because if you allow yourself to take a careful, impartial, well-informed look at what the propaganda is saying, you discover that it's false. And by the way, Jimmy, I'm not sitting here posing as someone who's beyond all that. I'm not acting like someone that this doesn't happen to. It continues to happen to me. I continue to discover that something I long believed is actually false, and had a purpose that one is obliged to figure out, because propaganda, and I'm not exaggerating, in combination with censorship, these things are going to be the death of us.
No
So,
doubt.
the point of my career really has been a growing realization of the danger posed by propaganda. That's why I'm glad to be talking to your audience today.
So just to put a button on the story of your COVID saga and your propaganda course at NYU, you did get some positive press in the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. They printed Matt Taibbi did an article titled "Meet the Censored." Mark Crispin Miller, NYU professor, becomes the latest academic to fall foul of the idea police. So,
Well,
here's one more from Fire. They said NYU ignores academic freedom, investigates Mark Crispin Miller's course content, and then right at the bottom here it says, contrary to the faculty members' assertions in their letter, Miller's teaching and extramural expressions are squarely protected by his right to academic freedom. So you actually ended up suing your faculty members at NYU over there trying to get you, kicked out. And so how did that turn out?
I sued them for libel, and it had an interesting effect on the university. They quickly threw my colleagues under the bus, which was kind of interesting. And, that I think relates to their hidden hand behind all this, because, I've been canceled many times. The movie tells those stories. But the latest and gravest of my sins was to take that critical approach to the COVID propaganda, because NYU and Big Pharma are like peas in a pod. Mm-hmm. I could probably come up with a better metaphor than that. But, what happened with the case was that I lost. I lost because the courts in New York are like that with NYU. NYU has a big, famous law school. Most members of the bench have, had various involvements giving talks for money, or they taught at NYU. And so I lost for no legal reason. There was no legal justification for my losing the case. It's just that I came up against power and I couldn't overcome it. But they threw my colleagues under the bus. It'll be a cold day in hell before my colleagues do that to somebody else, which is, important. So I'm about to retire. I'm no longer really at NYU. So, life goes on, and I continue to teach in my own way, right? Because I think that my teaching, which includes my Substack writings and public lectures, this is my life's mission. We absolutely have to protect democracy. We have to protect democracy by taking on the struggle against those things that threaten it. And I, as the trailer will show, that went through many different iterations. But the most important one of all is to encourage a careful, impartial, thoughtful study of propaganda, so that we know it when we see it, because it tends to hide by disguising itself as something else, right?
Right. So when you say that the NYU threw the faculty under the bus, how did that manifest? What did they do? Well,
they laid off me, and they basically, I don't even think there was a review of my conduct, Jimmy. I think that was horseshit. Because I never met any student or colleague who'd heard from anybody in the dean's office. So I think that was a threat. It was, in preparation of, bidding me farewell. But they stopped doing that. And now my colleagues were sort of on their own, because NYU didn't want any part of a libel action.
This is the last part I'll play for your new movie, all about your life. Let's get into it.
Course on propaganda told his class that there is significant evidence masks don't help prevent the spread of COVID.
Wearing 2 masks or trying to get one of those N95 medical grade masks, do you believe that that's advisable and makes a difference?
One of the things that the COVID rollout has done is to create a whole new category of forbidden speech.
The vaccine.
Oh, God.
And as soon as NYU officials got wind of that, they weren't exactly pleased.
If you raise questions about masking, you raise questions about vaccines, you even question the origins of the pandemic, you raise any questions at all, you're putting people at risk.
Professor Mark Crispin Miller tweeted that NYU was displeased that he questioned masking in his online propaganda class.
This is where I stepped in it, Jimmy.
Yes, here it comes. If you guys been wondering, what did he say? This is what he said.
I said, you got to read all the studies, right? All of them.
This is called doing your own research, and you're not supposed to do this. Even if you're a college professor, you're not supposed to read about COVID. You're not supposed to read about masks or vaccines or anything to do with the virus or anything.
My chair called and with a kind of forced joviality suggested that for the good of the department, I not teach the propaganda course the following
gosh.
As scheduled. And as it happens, Jimmy, I have not been allowed to teach it since.
No kidding.
I can't teach it anymore at NYU.
Mark really taught us how to think independently in a way that I hadn't ever before, and I think it's something I utilize greatly to this day.
See me on tour. I'll be in Lansing, Milwaukee, Albuquerque, Houston, Dallas, Salt Lake City, Las Vegas. Go to jimmydore.com for a link for tickets. If you go anywhere else, you're going to pay more.